Welcome to the Business Innovators Podcast. My name is Aoife Roche and I'm the host of the podcast. And on this show, every single week, we bring on entrepreneurs who are doing amazing things. Not everybody has built their business on social media. A lot of people have built their business behind the scenes and done amazing things. And my quest with this podcast is to really discover the story of some of these incredible entrepreneurs about how they got to where they are today. And today I'm very excited to have Jason LeDuc on the podcast. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm really excited. So you and I met at an event recently in Vegas, and that's how we connected. We realized we're both in the tech space and then in the consulting space. So tell me a little bit about your journey as an entrepreneur.
If you had asked me about being an entrepreneur, even as recently as about 15 years ago, I would have said you were crazy. Because growing up as a kid, all I ever wanted to do was be in the Air Force. I wanted to fly planes. I wanted to go all over the world. I wanted to work with tech, do all those things. And when I was growing up in the 80s and going to college in the 90s, that was, if you wanted to be in tech, especially cutting edge tech, that was what you had to do. You had to be involved with government. You had to be involved with military. That was where you had to go. It was pre the internet. The internet was just getting into businesses and homes at the time. So a lot has changed since then. And I did 20 years in the Air Force. I did go all over the world. I led teams all over the world doing very cool stuff, a lot of which I can't talk about, and bringing technical solutions to very real military and civil problems all around the world to advance the interests of national security here in the United States. And so my background was in tech and engineering in the Air Force. And as I got towards the end of my Air Force career and started thinking about retiring, I had to think about what was I going to do? Because I wasn't going to do nothing after the Air Force, which there's nothing wrong with. People do that all the time. But I wasn't going to do nothing. So I started thinking about, I was an instructor at Air War College, which is our senior level service school for the United States Air Force, where lieutenant colonels and colonels learn to go on how to be generals and senior leaders. So I was teaching in our online program for that school, and I said, there's a lot of really great stuff here that I wish I had known as a very young leader. And so I got really passionate about how do we bring the best leadership lessons in the world, whether they're from the Air Force, other parts of the military, the startup community, the corporate community, nonprofit, all those kinds of things. How do we bring the best leadership lessons together and create a company that can give, especially new leaders starting out in their journey, a way to learn these lessons that you and I have all learned the hard way. How do we give that to them in a way of, hey, you don't need to learn this the hard way?
So tell me, how do you think the Air Force impacted you developing as a leader?
So hindsight 2020, because I didn't realize this at the time, in the Air Force of the United States military, just about everything we do has some leadership component to it. Whether we're giving someone a project or we're just as simple as a task of, hey, the general's coming to visit tomorrow. We need to make sure the parking lot is swept so there's not trash and rocks and screws and all that kind of stuff in the parking lot. Go find someone who could use a little experience putting together a team and getting a task done. Right? We don't say it out loud like that, but that's really what a lot of the development is. So that was my big takeaway looking at the end of my Air Force career and thinking about leadership. We were being prepared to be leaders in so many different ways that we didn't know we were being prepared as leaders. When we're in that basic training mode, that officer training mode, and they're telling us you have to fold your socks a certain way, that's not because we really care about how socks are folded. It's because we care about things like attention to detail, taking the time to do something right, learning to do something right and quickly at the same time.
So I've done a lot of study on personality types, right, especially in sales. And what a lot of entrepreneurs are very type A, action type individuals. Why that is a credit to us because we're able to move forward and very risk averse. We're often not strong on structure and planning and processes, which are the key things to be an effective leader. You have to develop that rounded personality where, yes, you can be the head of the business driving out as the entrepreneur, but you also have to have an eye on making sure that you have systems planning and processes. So I know that you work with helping to develop leaders. Talk to me about what in the industry when it comes to entrepreneurs lacking those kind of solid soft skills.
I see this both in corporate, two sides of the same coin. One side in corporate and government kinds of things, and one side on the entrepreneur side. And the folks in corporate and government are often lacking that vision, that drive to go forward, that pushing yourself, that seeing a better future. We get so focused in government and corporate training people. These are the processes, these are the processes, these are the thought processes, these are the decision-making processes, information gathering process. We teach people how to solve problems. We don't always teach them about finding a problem that's worth solving in corporate and in government. And so that's, looking back on my career in the Air Force, that's what I saw. That's what I wish I had more of, someone saying, it's great that you're good at solving problems, but why don't you come up with a problem worth solving and then go solve it, which is what entrepreneurs have, right? Here's a problem worth solving. Here's something I'm really excited about, to the point of I'm going to drag everybody I know with me, and I'm going to create this vortex that pulls the world along with me. That's what our great entrepreneurs do, right? They create this vortex that pulls people along to solve this problem or to create this vision of a better world, but they don't always have the structural pieces. And that's why one of the big challenges, this from your experience, is when startup companies start to grow, and they get to the point where now the founder can't be involved in every little decision. They have to learn how to start delegating, and that they have to learn how to start letting go a little bit. They have to learn to start trusting. And even though that's two sides of the same coin, the process-oriented and the vision-oriented sides of the same coin, that learning how to delegate properly, that learning how to build trust with people, that learning how to build those professional relationships is something where both the entrepreneurs and the corporate side, the government side, need help with.
I think delegation and frustration go hand in hand. And there's a very delicate balance, because in order to grow and scale, you have to be able to delegate, right? Because if you continue to be a one-man band, it's just impossible to scale. But when you delegate, then you have to learn to be compassionate to that other people are not going to always do things exactly the way that you would do them. It's a very steep learning curve, and I think there can be a lot of frustration. And what you hear from entrepreneurs, I'm just going to do it myself. And that is so common. But nobody's learning, and I had to learn this the hard way, and I'm still learning on a daily basis. The idea that you think that you're going to keep doing it yourself is going to facilitate any form of growth or scaling in your business is just not going to happen. So it's, even if quality has to suffer somewhat in order to train and help people to learn, you almost have to take that as a rite of passage and for you to be able to scale.
Yeah, it's why so many founders end up becoming board members after a Series A, right? And then they start to bring in another team to do the management of the company day to day, right? So yeah, it's very hard. It's very hard on all those sides, corporate, government, entrepreneur, to let that go and to learn to say, it's okay that they didn't do it the way I would do it. What we need to learn as leaders, and I had to learn this too as a young captain and a major coming up in the Air Force, of I have to set clearly what I want the outcome to be and what my minimum expectations are. I have to create a box. I have to create a box for the folks who are working for me, or even my peers that I'm working with. Create this box for them to live in and let them know, if you live in this box, go ahead, knock yourself out, do whatever you need to do as long as you meet the outcome. If you want to step outside of that box, if you've got a really creative or innovative idea, let's talk about it before you go do it. But otherwise, go ahead, live in your box and deliver great outcomes. And we all have to learn in our as leaders in our head to say, that's not what I would have done. And then the out loud part is, but I think this will work. Let's go ahead with it.
Yeah, and being open, because you have to have that sort of openness to your staff's creativity, because the idea is that you want to get buy-in from your employees to the fact that they not only just become employees, but they're like key contributors to your business, where they feel that they're involved in the growth and the progression and in the decision making, and that they actually have a growth path. If you're a leader who is not prepared to let go and you're micromanaging them at every layer and level and not giving them any freedom or flexibility to make mistakes, you're only going to end up in they're either going to leave, first of all, or they're going to be non-performant, or they're going to be resentful because they're not going to feel that they're being appreciated. So when you go out and you coach on leadership, very large organizations to the small entrepreneur, talk to me about some of the key things that you teach when you are out as the core components for leadership development training.
The first thing that I teach in any program, we actually have a new program that's coming online later in the year, early 2025, both corporate and for individuals, 2 different programs. Where we start with that, when we start, whether we're talking about new managers, whether we're talking about director level people, whether we're talking about working with the C-suite, where we always start is, why leadership is important, why it's important to view yourself as a leader, what it really means to be a leader, and start talking about creating a culture of leadership in the company. And we have those conversations. We always start with that. And we use a lot of the examples that you were talking about of people leaving companies. We use that as the evidence about whether you believe in this or not. You need to do this because it's going to affect your recruiting. It's going to affect your retention. The number one reason people are leaving companies right now since the pandemic, because we went through the whole great resignation, great reshuffle, quiet quitting last year before, all that kind of stuff. There are a number of reasons why that happens. It's not compensation.
No.
It's not compensation. Not my statistics. If you have a problem with these statistics, your quarrel is with the MIT Sloan School of Management, not with me. So take it up with them. But people are not leaving because of compensation. But when they do exit interviews and anonymous surveys, things like Glassdoor, people are leaving at a rate of about 10 times more over toxic work culture.
Yeah.
And there's a number of other reasons between. Actually, in tech companies, high levels of innovation, people are leaving about 3 times more over the pressure to innovate constantly than they are over compensation. So I think leaders, executives who think we can just pay people more or give them better benefits or put a ping pong table in the break room is going to keep people around. That's what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to avoid those quick decisions. We're trying to get people to really think about, what does it mean to be a leader? How do I build a culture of leadership in the company? What is it people are really looking for from their workplace? And most of that is finding meaning in what they do, that they're contributing to something that's worth contributing to right now. And so that's part of what the case we use to convince people, this is why it's important to think of yourself as a leader and not just a manager or an executive.
I think you leaned into a very good point there, especially when we're leading with innovation. So if I look at our product that we're building, the Ask ROI product right now, it hasn't, there are things and parts of it that have been done, but tying this whole thing together in a system, the way that we're building it, hasn't been done. So sometimes as a leader, it is difficult because you don't really know where we're going either. I have an idea where we're going and where we want to go, but how we're going to get there and how quickly we can get there, how long it's going to take, how much money it's going to cost, all of those variables are unknown. And I think there is that pressure to go, what are you going to hit this deadline? Are you going to make this? Are you going to be able to do that? But we're like, we don't really know. We hope. We're planning, but your plan is only as good as the single point of failure that you have in your plan. So yeah.
Which usually ends up being your founder or your CEO is that single point of failure, right?
I am literally trying as best I can to manage myself out of my companies right now as pressure to go, what are you going to hit this deadline? Are you going to make this? Are you going to be able to do that? But we're like, we don't really know. We hope. We're planning, but your plan is only as good as the single point of failure that you have in your plan. So yeah.
Which usually ends up being your founder or your CEO is that single point of failure, right?
I am literally trying as best I can to manage myself out of my companies right now because what I've realized as an entrepreneur, I'm extremely good at creating things, getting ideation, putting it together, getting it, and then not that I lose interest in it, but it's not as exciting for me once it's all up and running and revenue generating. So it's the idea, and I think that's a good learning for people to realize once you get that all set up, then you go back to being the vision, and then you bring in the people around you, or you hire the people around you. And I always try to hire people who are better than me. I don't want people who aren't on par at a minimum. Even when I hire media buyers, because I do media buying, I'm like, please come in and beat my ads. I want you to beat my ads. And they're like, okay, is this a challenge? But I want you to be better than me. You're not going to outshine me. If anything, it will impress me even more by having someone in our organization that's growing. So that's one point. But the other one that you lean into, which is critical, around culture. And the company culture and having a culture. When there's a toxic culture in an organization, I've worked in corporates all over the world, and it is just so detrimental to the team when there is backbiting, talking about each other, gossiping, colluding, seeing everyone on an email. That's my pet peeve when people do that. It's literally, if you want to get on my bad side, send an email that CCs every man and his dog. And that's really, but what do you see and how do you help people with toxic culture?
Yeah, so when we think of toxic culture, when a lot of people think of toxic culture, that's what they think of, the gossip, the backbiting.
Yeah.
They think of toxic culture in a much more basic way. Like, yes, that's a toxic culture, but it starts much earlier than that. And for me, again, coming from the Air Force, where we're really big on words and actions matching, it's when you claim to have a culture and that culture is not being followed at every level of the company. That's where, if that's happening, you need to fix something. You are on the road to all the really bad stuff we talked about, because if we say we have a culture where we support each other, we don't talk badly about each other behind our back, but we also have a culture of we clean up everything at the end of the day. But the frontline managers are letting that slide. That's where it starts to happen, right? And if the frontline managers are letting it slide, it's one of two reasons. It's either that they don't think it's important and they know that no one's ever going to check up on them, or, and more likely, the senior leadership says these things are really important, but we don't do them ourselves, and we aren't going to check to see if anybody else does them. So that's where those things start. And the way you fix that is by making sure words and actions match. And I'm not here to tell anybody what culture you should have in your business. That's up to you. What I'm telling people is, if you want a certain culture in your business, you better be doing it yourself at the top. You better be having those conversations with your next level down managers of making sure of what they're doing to ensure that culture exists all the way down to your frontline employees. Only 5% of frontline employees understand what their company's big picture strategy is. Again, MIT Sloan School of Management, not my statistics. Only 5% of employees understand that. Frontline employees understand that. And that's where you start to set yourself up that way, because we're doing it because I said so, not because it's contributing to a bigger picture. Making sure that as part of your culture, understanding how everyone contributes to that bigger picture and why it's important for the world. You're doing some really amazing things with your companies, and you and I understand why that's really important for the world. The challenge for you is every time a new team member comes on, how do you make sure they understand this isn't just important for you to get a paycheck and do some work for us. It's important to the world for some reason. People want to have meaning in what they do. They can't have that if they don't understand how they're contributing to a bigger picture. And that's the beginning of culture, is we all understand that meaning, and we all are doing the things we say we do to bring that outcome about.
Yeah, it's like that idea is do as I say, not as I do. And you have that style of leadership. I had an example of that even yesterday. So we're doing a lot with the government and government contracting space right now. And I want to find a really good proposal management tool. So I was testing a bunch of them yesterday. And I wanted my team to go in and do. But I was like, how can I ask them to go in and, without understanding the scale of the task, how long it's going to take? So I spent quite a bit of time going through one of them yesterday. And then this morning I was like, here's all the work that I've done on this so far. This is the problems that I found. And now I need you to have a look at what I've done. Now go and take that and cross-check that against another 10 softwares. It's a lot easier for me to ask someone to do something when they already know that I've made an attempt to do it. It's when people are giving an ask to someone, they either don't understand why they're being asked, or they're like, they're only asking me to do it because they wouldn't do that.
Yeah, and that's not why we delegate. It's one of the reasons we delegate is because I just don't want to do this, and that's okay. But there are two reasons we delegate. One, we really don't have time for it. We as leaders need to be focused on the bigger picture, right? Upward and outward is where leaders always need to be looking, right? Even if you're a frontline manager, I always talk about the conventional wisdom is try to solve your boss's problems. What you really want to do is try to solve your boss's problems. Yeah. Because if you understand your boss's problems and you can solve that problem, you're solving a problem for your boss. And that contributes to the big picture, right?
But I think that you will actually, sorry to cut you off, but you will actually be paid more with that one mindset. My job is to solve my boss's problem and my boss's problem. You will be paid handsomely in any organization, in any industry, if you find those core problems and you go and solve them. It's that straightforward. And
not because you're making their lives easier. That's not why you'll make more money while you'll get promoted. You'll get promoted in those cases because you will show you understand the big picture of what's going on with the organization. You will show you understand the challenges involved with accomplishing what the team wants to accomplish, and you'll show that you have figured out ways to do that. So yeah, I think that's what everyone needs to be doing. And not because you're just going to get on your boss's good side, which is a side benefit, because you're going to show you really understand what's going on. The second reason we delegate, and this, again, hindsight 2020 from my days in the military, is because we want to use that delegation, those tasks, those projects, as opportunities to develop future leaders, right? You took on a really hard part of your task yesterday, and you could have used that as an opportunity to delegate, to help develop a future leader. You could have said to one of your folks, I don't know how long this is going to take. I don't know what's involved with this, but I need someone to go figure this out. And I'm looking at you to go figure this out. And here's the box I want you to live in. I want you to ask yourself these questions, but part of the challenge is I want you to come up with all the questions we need to be asking as a team when we send everyone out to look at all these other software packages, right? Or all these other tools to do this. So often we delegate because A, we don't have time for it, or B, we don't want to do it. My challenge to the world is whenever anything comes along, even if it's easier for you to do it yourself, and a lot of us want to lead from the front, even if you want to look like you're leading from the front, is this something we can use as an opportunity to develop someone's future leadership abilities so that when something really big comes along and I'm not able to take care of it, that's someone who I've prepared for a really big task?
I think the challenge comes in when, speed of implementation is one of my core values and across my companies. And then knowing, I like to have a look at the task, roughly guideline about how long it takes, because then I have a benchmark. And often, and this is probably why sometimes we go through a lot of editors and different things, because I'm like, or web designers, I'm like, I know how long that takes to do that task. So sending me a bill for 14 days for a task that I know took 2 is really not going to fly with me. And then, but sometimes that can be a very destructive mindset, because then you get really frustrated and then you go, you know what, I'm just going to do it myself.
Yeah.
And then you waste time doing things that you shouldn't be doing because you should be delegating. But then it's a challenge because the delegation doesn't get things done at the speed that you want. So it's a very delicate balance to find the core values of the business versus being able to delegate across the organization.
Yeah, it comes down to stakes, right? How high are the stakes of getting this right and getting it done quickly? And that's something, as we try to delegate for any reason, is, especially if we're doing it as a leadership development activity, are the stakes so high that I can't afford to let someone make mistakes on this and take a long time with this, or both? So that's something we as leaders always need to think about is, what are the stakes on this, and are they so high it's got to be right the first time? I can't let someone struggle with this, because leadership development comes with letting people struggle a little bit.
Yeah.
And if the stakes are really that high, then it might be time to go into command mode and say, okay, I'm taking this part, you're taking this part, you're taking this part. We'll all come back together. We'll get it done.
So how do you manage conflict management then from a leadership perspective? Because let's say, imagine you have an employee now and they're struggling to do something within the timelines, or they're not getting up to speed. And it's creating, because there can be two forms of conflict. I see, thankfully not so much in our organization, but in other organizations we work in, where you have a conflict between the boss and the person because they think they're non-performant. Then you have a conflict between the other person and their peers sometimes because they see them non-performant. What are some of the key tools and techniques that you help leadership teams with conflict management?
Yeah, this is funny because I started working some negotiation and conflict management workshops a few years ago, and the Air Force actually brings me back twice a year to do that with some of their folks who are about to become flight commanders and flight sergeants for the first time. So some of the things we do in that course is, first, we get people comfortable with the idea of being in conflict and recognize that conflict happens, and if you try to avoid it or keep it from happening, you're missing out on opportunities. So first we show them through a series of videos and stories that there's opportunity in conflict. And so even though conflict can be unpleasant, if we embrace it, we can get better outcomes for ourselves and for the whole team. And then we go through talking about some negotiation skills. But one of the things I really like about that course is we bring in some of the concepts of critical thinking. And critical thinking encompasses a lot of stuff. But what I like to talk about when we go into conflict is making sure that we're right. We're right in our minds, we're right in our hearts. We have done the homework before we go into a negotiation or a discussion in a conflict to make sure that, one, we have our facts straight, we have our understanding of our own interests and what the outcome we really want to get and need to get out of this is. And then we learn to ask the questions of what does the other person really want or need to get out of this, as opposed to what their position might be coming in, and start to get to those win situations, breaking down the idea of getting out of that used car mentality of you want to get the highest price possible, I want to get the lowest price possible if I'm the buyer and you're the seller. But what we're really trying to do is expand that space and go, is this even a used car situation, or is there a lot more trade space here that we can talk about? Because sometimes I can do something to make your life easier if you can give me what I'm looking for my interest. Sometimes it doesn't have to be a trade of resources. Sometimes I can just do something to make your life easier.
Yeah.
And in the startup world, companies do that all the time, right? We can provide our service and you buy from us, we'll provide our service for free. Some kind of combination like that. Or we're working on stuff that needs a similar thing. I can do something to make your life easier. Can you meet me here on my price, right? Instead of just butting heads over incrementally moving on price or whatever the scenario is.
So talking about the startup community, I know you're involved in Vets in Tech. Tell me a little bit about that.
Vets in Tech is great. Found out about Vets in Tech a couple of years ago. The more I found out and the more I find out, the more amazed I am at what Vets in Tech does. So Vets in Tech is a national charity. It's based out of the Bay Area. It's founded by Craig Newmark, Craigslist. Craig.
Okay, yeah.
He founded it over 10 years ago now at this point. And it's all about getting veterans into tech careers, and not just veterans, but military spouses, dependents, anything we can do to get our military connected community into tech careers. And so they have 3 pillars that they work out of. One is education, so going to school, formal education, that kind of stuff to get people the education for tech careers, whether that's engineering, computer science, whatever it is. The second is employment, and that comes with helping veterans find jobs in the tech arena. And not just helping them find jobs, but showing them that there are opportunities coming out of the military, or even if you've been out of the military for a while, for a number of years, there are opportunities for you to change your career and go into tech. And that comes with all kinds of training. There's all this free training that you can go look at on the Vets in Tech website, vetsintech.co. You can go look at all this. It's all training that's free to vets. They don't have to use any of their GI Bill benefits, which so we get all these great educational benefits in the military and coming out of the military. Vets in Tech is trying to set up their programs either through their own programs or with partner programs. And the tech partners that go along with Vets in Tech are like the big players in the tech community. Google's a tech partner. Adobe's a tech partner. DraftKings is a huge tech partner. Disney. There's probably 40 or 50 big tech companies or big tech and entertainment companies centered on Silicon Valley and really all over the country that are involved. And so employment piece, these are the partners that are looking to hire veterans for technical jobs. And a lot of those jobs can be remote. So twice a year, they do a big virtual hiring fair where the companies that are looking to hire veterans in tech positions, they get online. Each of the companies kind of pitches what they're about and what they're looking for, and then they can do all these breakout rooms on whatever software they're using. I think they were using Zoom last time. There's one coming up in a couple of months. But veterans can tune in and see if they're interested in that, what kind of training they would need to get. Some of these companies will hire veterans, not really right on the spot, but without any training, and they'll do the training with you. And then there's the entrepreneurship pillar, where we help veterans who wanted to get into entrepreneurship in the tech space. We have resources to help them with that as well. And they just launched their the Vets in Tech Entrepreneur platform earlier this year.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Jason, as we come to the end of the interview, what would be a key piece of advice that you would give anyone who is growing and scaling their business that is now having a challenge with either letting go or, like we've talked about, not really understanding how they're planning to develop their team or manage as they scale these numbers? What's some key advice that you would give them?
The biggest piece of advice I would give is think of everybody who's working for you as a potential leader in your company. Think about not just the role they're filling today, or if you're hiring, not just the role you're hiring them to fill. Think about what they could be doing in the future in your company. Think about the roles they could fill, the challenges that they could help you overcome with their unique skills and experience. And think about what you as a leader might need to do to help them grow into that role. Because leaders don't usually come fully formed. They need those experiences. They need to struggle a little bit. They need those opportunities to learn, develop experience, develop their own confidence in their leadership and decision-making ability. and then they're ready for the next step. So think about where you'd like to see people fill in the future so that you can go on to that next big thing you want to do in the future.
Amazing. And I think that was a really great one where you said leaders don't come fully formed.
Not usually. Every so often you find one.
You find a unicorn.
Yeah.
Jason, thank you very much for being a guest on the podcast. Great to have you. Always enjoy talking to you. Always learn a lot when it comes to anything to do with leadership and development. So that ends the podcast for this week's episode. If you would like to leave us a comment or drop a review, that really helps us. It is available. We're on all of the main podcasting platforms as well as on YouTube. So that's all from me today. Thank you for listening and thank you for watching.